Berserk is a series that has had some extremely high highs for me here on the channel, but unfortunately it seems we have decided to sink into some mildly low lows. But before we get into this, if you haven't noticed from the last Berserk review here on the channel, we have had to basically create two versions of these videos, a censored and uncensored version, because if I even talk about some of the things that are going to be happening in these next few chapters, this video would likely be age restricted. So because of that, if you would like to see the uncensored version of this video, it will be thrown up on my Patreon and even be a little bit longer than the version that's going to be on YouTube due to some of the topics we need to cover that I otherwise couldn't really cover. That being said though, I'll still be putting maximum effort into bringing the uncensored version to you, and it is absolutely enough to get the full well-rounded vision of my review for this, the largest section of Berserk we have reviewed yet on the channel. Now the reason it's the largest section though is I don't feel the need to go particularly deep into much that happens here. I've said several times before that Berserk shines when it focuses on character building and tends to stumble a bit when the narrative has to come to the forefront. And there was a good bit of stumbling here, as well as some elements introduced that just felt kind of lazy or not well fleshed out to me, or a disservice to the characters that the events were happening to. It wasn't horrible though, and without any further ado, let's go ahead and pick up with Thousand Year Fiefdom. And just so you know, we'll be taking Thousand Year Fiefdom all the way up into Requiem of the Wind. Not into that, but up to that point. You get it. And we are, of course, picking up with the rescue of Griffith, and there is some dangerous climbing to be done as they are descending down into this tremendous pit where the bottom cell is apparently where Griffith is being held. Now, there is some really interesting world building done here, and this might be my favorite part of this entire chunk, and it's starting pretty early on. And this is from Princess Charlotte, who says about like 1,000 years ago, there were warring kingdoms that were brought under one king that created an empire, and he wore a skull helmet. And he was just full of greed and overtaxing his people until God was forced to send down angels to punish him for his discretions. And obviously the skulled horsemen definitely make Gut go, "What? What? I saw a skull." Charlotte says, like, this is just some fairy tale, but of course we the reader are like, that is what happened. Actually, after the events that happened here, that's probably close to what happened, but it was a bit more demonic than angelic, if you know what I'm saying. Did I say demonic? I meant demonic. But those angels being sent down apparently sunk that emperor's city, which is why there's this massive pit that is now being utilized for prisoners. And Casca even drops her torch, which just reveals how deep this goes, as well as the general, like, more Greek aesthetic that these older civilizations apparently had here, which I really like. Anytime you can bring in like a Greco-Roman aesthetic to a fantasy world, it just, I don't know if it's because I watched Troy a lot when I was young, but it gets me going. And if you like for me to have an affinity for Greco-Roman fantasy books, try Song of Achilles. It's really good. I do want to also say, I have so appreciated the slow, subtle world building within Berserk that goes into things like its histories. Well, very rarely just talking in long, unnecessary monologues about how the kingdoms and rivalries between the current rulers came to be. I've gotten a pretty good grasp of it, and it's all been through small things like this that can be exposition-y, but never feel totally out of place, and really do add a vibrancy to the world that obviously Berserk is quite well known for. We also see these symbols carved all over the bodies down in this chasm, which kind of makes me like, were they cultists? I'm excited to find out more. I don't know yet. I hope I get that information. We see Guts' suspicion they are being followed, though, but he ignores his gut instinct, which is kind of a mistake, kind of not, because it leads to some badassery. But they reach Griffith's cell, and at first, while they think it's empty, they push in deeper, and they find the emaciated Griffith. And he has clearly had the gambit of torture done to him, which we'll get into in a second. Guts runs over to him and holds him close, obviously very deeply disturbed disturbed by what has been done to Griffith. I mean, just on the surface level, there's clear skinnings, his tendons have been slit, and he is starving. Purely a life of suffering, quite clearly, for the past year. He even tells Casca to stay back because he doesn't want her to see Griffith like this, showing a level of awareness from Guts that, yes, he understands Casca still really cares about this guy, and it would be bad for her to see him up close in this form. He tries to take off the mask, but is like, oh, no, we're gonna keep that on. And yeah, even his tongue is missing. In a really emotional moment, Guts actually just pulls in Griffith for a hug, and despite how much I already hate Griffith, it is nice to see like a little bit of humanity between these two, and there's actually a shocking amount of that in the pages to come, which I'm still unsure how I feel about, though of course it's causing me to think and be uncomfortable, so good job, Maria, you're making me feel the way you want me to feel. Also, just Guts's reaction here hits really true to home for me, as someone who has lost friends or had friends get in accidents, and when you first see them, that emotion that could just hit you so hard, the mixture of love and concern, it's visceral and it's raw, and I feel like it's really landing well here. Charlotte tries to go to him, but is held back, of course, and then, unfortunately, the door is slammed shut to Griffith's cell behind them, because the little torturer who's having his way with Griffith for so long followed them down and summoned the guards. And then he begins to start going into what exactly he did to Griffith, and I don't really feel the need to get into every little torture that was done to him, but it was essentially the full gambit of ouchie, as well as some hints towards some more psychological and other types of torture that, yes, truly Griffith has been in hell for a year, which I'm sure has done wonders to his mental state. But the torturer then says, like, just give up. This door is 4 times thicker than it is standard supposed to be. There's no way you could escape. And of course, Guts bursts through the door and murders this man by stabbing him through the stomach, holding him over the pit, and while this man begs for his life, cutting out his tongue and dropping him into the depths below. I really thought we were gonna get like an impact shot, but we don't. But they have also been surrounded by guards, and while these people were first like, hey, surrender, we have you surrounded with crossbows, we get this facial expression from Guts, which lets us know we're about to get a display of Guts's power. And he says, keep up with me, before moving so quickly they can't even fire their crossbows before he starts butchering their men. He pushes his way deep into their forces, and we actually then cut to the outside after watching Casca gather everyone up to follow Guts's bloody path. Then we see guards standing around going like, we hear them coming out. They must have them prisoner. But of course, no. Guts lands soaked in blood, breathing hard, and every soldier is kind of just in shock of how many people did this guy just kill to get, oh my god! Well, we're boned! The commander tries to rally his troops and be like, attack! Attack before he catches his breath! Oh my god, what are you doing? But Guts is so intimidating, everyone's like, what are you, And so Guts then decapitates the person leading this crew and continues his bloody path. And we get this specific frame of Guts, which I really like from an artistic standpoint, because it really feels like he's being framed like one of the monsters or the demons of this world, and it feels earned. Like Guts is continuing to just be soaked in blood to the point where absolutely he feels like a monster on the battlefield. So this framing is like so well justified, and even in the worst parts of Berserk, the art just continues to... We see the king, though, is then also ordering his troops off, and he then summons a group of from a mysterious land assassins to come and try and take down the people who are running off with his daughter, who he has learned is with this party. This is where some of my heavier criticisms are going to be rooted for this section. I don't mind, like, of course, a special group of assassins to go after our party, whatever. And we even cut back to this party's escape, and they're remarking like, hey, the people kind of just pulled off from chasing us. Are we going crazy? What's with that? Smart enough to realize, yeah, there's probably something coming. And it is also an attempt to make sure Princess Charlotte isn't going to be killed, because we even see the king tell these assassins, if one fingernail is broken on my daughter, you will pay the price. But yes, get her back safe and kill Griffith. And we see Guts is in rough shape. He's gasping for breath, drenched in sweat and blood. And no, he's not an immortal demon, despite the framing. He needs a break. And there's some moments of affection between Casca and him, and we continually get cuts of Griffith watching it. Don't like that! Stop it! I don't trust you as far as... I could probably throw you... I trust you far less than I could throw you. But they are then running through the sewers, and Charlotte, to her credit, is like taking measures to be able to move faster, getting rid of her like noble poshness, and just being like, I'm gonna get out of here. Guts has some instincts where he's like, hey, something's wrong, and then they are attacked by these assassins. And excuse me, I gotta say it, but that is one Lanky boy. It's a nice little fun back and forth. I do appreciate the kind of alternate attacks that are then demonstrated here. There's also some interesting moments where Griffith is about to be hit with a poison. Casca actually blocks the dart, and so she's hit with the poison. There's a beat of like negotiation between the assassins and the party then, because these assassins are like, oh my god, we can't really have her get wounded. Okay, give us her. Wait, time out. Charlotte, did you get hurt? Guys, Princess Charlotte got hit by the poison dart. Yes, it's Doug's fault. All right, send her home. Then we get back to the murder. Everyone good with that? And massive javelins start being hurtled by a big old man towards the rescuing party. And through some quick thinking of creating darkness and sparks off the wall, they are then able to defeat these assassins. And if you're thinking, that seemed like a really quick setup and payoff for then these people to be killed not too difficultly, I agree. And we'll get in more of that later. But one of them has lived and then unveils themselves down the further in the hall to have a wall of what looks like fire come at them, but through some quick thinking once again, they survive. And there's a little bit too much talking between the party and what seems like a rushed moment for my liking, but overall it was a cool action sequence, and I'll give credit there while having narrative criticisms. Actually, I want to touch on this more than I did my original review, because continually throughout Berserk, and I want to appreciate this more, there is this dedication to action set pieces that really pays off, and they often also rely on our characters being intelligent and creative, or displaying a slight increase of power that feels justified due to training or time passing, and I really enjoy that, despite how bombastic the action in this series is getting, despite it being a bit too action heavy for this segment for my personal taste. It's never poorly executed in any conceivable way. High effort for action always in Berserk. But through their avoidance of this fireball, the rescue crew with Griffith, without Princess Charlotte because she has been taken back by the assassins, are able to break free off into the world. But the king is not going to just let them go, because we cut to the king actually murdering the assassin who brought back Princess Charlotte due to the poison she had to be cured from that was dosed with her through that dart. And he's then threatening Princess Charlotte's maid, who was obviously complicit with a lot of this, but Princess Charlotte essentially says, no, I made her do it, don't hurt her, and saves her maid's life. But Princess Charlotte, yes, is now back in the grasp of her perverted father. And the father actually promises Princess Charlotte that they will not be chasing Griffith and the party anymore in an attempt to placate her. But of course, once Princess Charlotte is gone, the king says, summon the Black Dogs. And surprisingly, even his own men are like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Maybe don't, because apparently this is a band of the kingdom's worst criminals that were utilized during the war on the farmost fringes of the battlefields to just kind of terrorize the enemy. They were put on the frontier to do as much moral damage as possible, one of the most awful practices that has actually happened in warfare, a type of damage that obviously is extremely hard to repair even generations later. But the king doubles down, and we get a cut to, and the censoring begins, because we see a humanoid type creature in the middle of an orgy, and their orgy is interrupted, and they are summoned by the king, and they are told they're going to be going after the Band of the Hawk, which is something that seems to really excite them. But we see the king on his throne, and we're going back to his memories of when he first kind of assembled the Black Dogs, and it's a pretty disturbing memory where we see this humanoid-like creature who's obviously part demon placed a person who challenged him in a prisoner-style arena on top of a tower and impaled him through a spike, which obviously earned him to be the leader of the Black Dogs. This is not a normal person we're dealing with, and apparently they even scared the hell out of the king. And the king at this point honestly looks like extremely haggard. They've aged a lot in this last year, and it's just kind of, in my interpretation, a symbol of the depravity this king is obviously slowly descending into with what he attempted to do to Princess Charlotte. But he calls them the Black Hounds of Hell, and he feels like he's unleashing an evil beyond human control. Which just, I'd regret it if I didn't say it real quick, but anyone in my audience considering unleashing an inhuman evil on the world for their own gain, I will advise against it. It tends to come back to bite you in the butt. But we cut back to the rescue party as they have met with a group of farmers who have actually helped them in their escape, giving them a cart with horses, and this person is essentially honored to be helping the Band of the Hawk after all the great work they did during the war, at least according to this person. Casca is put to watch after Griffith, and she kind of sits with him quietly, and she's also thinking about she can't find the words for what she wants to say to Griffith, and I get this sense that she's filled with a lot of pride of the fact that yes, she rescued rescued Griffith, and on top of that, she got the Band of the Hawk out of some incredibly desperate situations. But they comment on the city rolling away on the horizon, and we even see Griffith thinking back to his childhood, oddly. There's a lot going on with his psychology that has me very interested, while also kind of terrified, but Casca's holding him nicely. I'm sure she won't come to regret that. But then we get into the building up of the Black Dogs as they come to the same farmers and massacre them, and getting into part we're going to cut out for the censored version starting now, and back to non-censored. Don't get me wrong, I love the buildup of a good villain in some extreme ways, but this is, in my opinion, something that is done so often and so lazily, it just leaves a bad taste on my palate. And especially with us having a different bad guy crew hyped up, introduced, and wiped out. And now we're getting a second one introduced, hurriedly built up, and I'm sure about to be wiped out because I've already read this once. I know what happens. I'm getting through the point where I read two. And I feel like it could have actually been more earned, been more effective, if instead it was one person given stakes to hunt these people down, and you just weave all the things together to have them be built up in a sense. It's like the Darth Maul problem in the prequels, where it's like, if you kept Darth Maul around and then had him be in Grievous's place, it could have felt better for those movies. Obviously, what was done with Maul later on in the cartoons was great, but like for those movies, having the built-up tension and relationship between him and Obi-Wan would have been more satisfying than this random Grievous introduction that was like, why are you here? Like, picture this. Instead of having this band of assassins and then the Black Dog Knights, the Black Dog Knights are sent after the party escaping in the sewer right away. They were just as available as these assassins seem to be. In fact, we're already seeing that the Black Dog leader is apparently in the city in the middle of his orgy, so all right. He is then summoned to go after them through the sewer. He goes into the sewer, and our party narrowly escapes by the skin of their teeth, but he does manage to grab Princess Charlotte, and he handles her quite roughly. Not as bad as we see in the censored portion. This almost gets him punished by the king, but of course, how powerful and bullying he is, he just kind of refuses to take any discipline, and the king does agree, though, to send him on out after Griffith. One, because he does want Griffith taken care of, and two, he's kind of afraid to have this guy even around. That would build a lot more weight behind him, and then even, again, he could do the terrible, terrible thing that was in the censored portion, and it would still at least feel like, okay, this person is not under control by the king, they are doing terrible stuff to the king's own subjects, and no one can stop them, even when out on king's orders. It kind of has this 1-2 buildup of the abuse from Charlotte to this, rather than just, and now this is happening. And you're going to say, well, if he's so powerful the king couldn't really control him, then how in the world is this person actually taking orders in the first place? I'm sitting here wondering how they were ever put in handcuffs in the first place, so it still makes sense to me within the same flaws that are already there with this villain. But we see they have rigged up a better escape, because as Guts is going off to try and delay this horde, the cart is going to go for a bridge where a bunch of gunpowder has been rigged up. Guts does do a good job of slowing down this horde, though he remarks no matter how many he kills, they aren't slowing down. Like, they're just letting him butcher and butcher and butcher, and they're just throwing themselves at him with fear, and it's because of their leader behind. And they're also kind of like extending the naked corpses of the people they and murdered, and it's like, okay, and it kind of messes with Guts, but not a lot. But once he actually reaches the leader of this band and swings at them, they catch Guts's sword one-handed. And obviously this kind of is sending Guts into remembering the last time he fought a humanoid demon-like creature, Nosferatu Zod. Though this guy does not strike nearly as intimidating or as well introduced as Nosferatu Zod. But Guts is saved by the member of the Band of the Hawk that I always just refer to as Big Guy. For some reason, this guy's name has just not been sticking in my head, so I finally went and verified. It's Pippin? Oh my god, how my brain forgot that. That's the most memorable name for this dude ever, but I appreciate you all who have helped me remember Judo's correct pronunciation and gendering. I'm really trying to get that straight in my head, but it's like dug in there deep, so I'll probably make a mistake again. I finally got Gaston's name down, but like, Pippin. How did I not remember Pippin? And I like that this guy has twice now saved the party and Guts throughout this sequence. It's good to see him get some moments of shining aside from just being big strong guy in the background. Though looking at this monster's face, Guts specifically remarks, I know this, I remember this feeling, which is his remembering of Nosferatu Zod, and also the Skull King. So I think this is implying there's just this demonic aura around these people, and that's interesting. Guts is called off, though, and they manage to make their way back across the bridge before it is detonated, giving them a bit of a reprieve, though we quickly see it's not much of one. And just continuing to tick off the uber badass guy who's just so evil checklist, we also watch the leader of the Band of the Black Dogs killing his own men for having any form of questioning, and really it's an excuse to show him butchering his own people because scary. Building his character, he's taking pleasure, excited play in the pursuit of the people they're after. It's very typical quick badass type. It's, okay, we need this guy to be quick and scary, I will do these characteristics, move on. Oh wait. I forgot to set the mood. Highlight light added. But Guts is thinking back over his encounters with demons while riding alongside Griffith, and I like the kind of like puzzle pieces we as the readers definitely have already put together, but watching Guts struggle with them is like, ah! That's actually a good narrative shining moment of this whole chapter sequence thing here, where we're watching these things play out and you're like, oh, this is going to finally come to a conclusion soon, oh boy. But they get to their next trap they've laid for those pursuing them, and it appears to be a rock scramble, which I'm not entirely sure where this is set up or activated with, but it seems some members of the Band of the Hawk have set up some stuff to drop on their pursuers, and that is done. So these are just my random last-minute edit at midnight after dark thoughts here. I already released the uncensored version, but I'm watching through this again, and I'm realizing there's a stylistic taste difference between me and Berserk, and it's not wrong to have this choice where they will just do things like having gunpowder under the bridge or rocks set up, and you just accept as the reader, like, okay, the good guys, protagonists set that up beforehand, it's no big deal. But I am of the taste of like Robert Jordan's school, where I want to know all the details. Tell me everything. Was this Judo's idea? What about Pippin? I want to know what people's roles are. And did the rooms have curtains? That's an inside joke for Wheel of Time fans. There's a lot of curtains in Wheel of Time. We see, again, the guy pursuing them is just taking pleasure in it, and he actually punches through a boulder, kind of feeling like an N64 boss for me. That's actually kind of badass to watch him just like, bam! Like, okay, that was cool. I'll give you that. That was cool. Anyone punching a boulder, that's immediately brownie points for me. But they make it back to the bulk of the remaining forces that split off from the actual party of the Band of the Hawk, because remember, that was massacred. And now a full-fledged battle with those pursuing them will commence. It is actually going pretty all right, where the forces that are essentially just rabid barbarians following this demonic character are being handled by the Band of the Hawk really well. The problem is Guts is struggling with this monster on his own. Devil dogs? Is it black dogs, black hounds, or devil dogs? I'm seeing all three. They're bad puppies. That's what this group is. But before Guts actually engages with this monster who he's calling out specifically to duel, which of course is just Guts' MO of like, biggest, baddest dude, I'm gonna do my best. He's afraid. I do think Guts in this moment is afraid. He will never back down because he just can't admit that to himself, and I like that continuity. But what I like is that the response he gets from this challenge is,
aha, that stupid Calzad said there was a lively one in the Band of the Hawk, and that must be you.
And this confirms for Guts the conspiracy he's been building on his board, where he's like, no, this is connected to Nosferatu Zod and the Skull King and what's going on. It's all connected. What's it have to do with it? Grab it. And so I definitely think he's going to start asking some pretty poignant questions in the future. But will he be fast enough to avoid tragedy? No. And we know that for the Black Swordsman. And I like that. I like that we know there's going to be a big failure on Guts' part. It makes all of this so painfully delicious. We see Griffith is watched over by a couple members of the Band of the Hawk, and he is actually trying to like move and grab a sword, but because his tendons have been slit and all this other stuff, he's just completely incapable of doing anything. And we're watching the once ambitious cult leader of this group, who was going to seize the world by the reins, now can't even defend himself. And it's quite the setup for what's to come. I feel like there's this massive storm on the horizon that's so big, the storm that's actively happening doesn't even register. And it's not the best storm Berserk's presented one, but also it's like, oh boy, this is like a thunderstorm. That's a tornado mixed with a hurricane, a blizzard, and some hail coming down the road. Like, okay, lightning strikes, but that's scary. Costco rejoins the battle, and we see from multiple perspectives people watching Guts battle this band leader, and they're moving so fast. It's the most impressive display from Guts. They remark that he must have been training after all this time. And when Guts finally thinks he has an opening and swings for the head, the creature bites down on his sword and stops the decapitation. Oh god. And he even says Shokrosh, because he has a sword now. Shokrosh. Like that. Here, I'll put the panel. So close. But at this point, Guts' horse is punched out because this person does punch things. We did realize that earlier. decent work for a shallow, quick villain, I'll give you that. But this creature dismounts himself and remarks,
This was only meant to be a light snack, but I can't wait. I might just eat everything. I won't wait till the eclipse.
so there's something about to happen in the demon world, and this person's just spewing off about it in a borderline too overt way for me. Though he's kind of presented as so stupid and blunt, I guess it does fit what's there. Okay, so maybe I was a bit too harsh in this villain because I'm realizing in hindsight maybe a lot of these negative feelings were coming from how much I was supposed to be hating them, because in hindsight, after I'm getting through it all, they kind of are like the check every box for the instant hateable villain, and so it does feel formulaic, but at the end of it, I am still where the author wants me to be. So now I'm kind of conflicted, and I'm like, maybe I ended up disliking Wild. Sorry, I did end up looking up the name. I kept calling him the demon. His name's Wild, I think. It's spelled like this. I did end up hating him a good amount, and is it just me misreading my disliking, or is this a dumb, blunt villain I shouldn't give that too much credit to, and I'm just being won over by stylization and good creature design? I don't know. But this creature is blocking Guts at his most ferocious and fastest with just a log. And we even see Casca and the Band of the Hawk have successfully routed the enemy who was retreating, which distracts this leader, who then knocks over a tree to block off his own man's retreat before resuming his fight with Guts, transforming before he does so, revealing his true form, which we see Griffith sees as well, as this gargantuan behemoth beast, which of course just reminded me of a Titan from Attack on Titan. Everyone thinks of a Titan from Attack on Titan with this, right? Like it's a little different, but it definitely feels like a Titan from Attack on Titan. And I like this shot of Guts before the demon because, of course, the art is always banging. It's a pretty decent demon design, but while it does present him as small and dwarfed, he's still standing so strong. I don't get backing down or running away. Of course, he's afraid, as we see in this panel, but Guts does not back down. On that same note, Casca, she watched Guts get slammed with a tree and sent flying, and my least favorite part of this entire chunk then happens, because she runs over but then is knocked down. Fun part of the uncensored videos, I had someone tell me go back and check that Casca part again, because she's not down for that long, and it's not really her fault she fell, it's the fact that the horse got startled. And that is true. I still think she's down for a little bit longer than the warrior that we've been established with should be, but I was confusing her being down longer with this just showing the demon going off and fighting some of the cavalry before coming back to deal with her, and during that time is when she went to Guts, and I was just assuming she was down that whole time. But I don't think she was in rereading it, so thank you, uncensored people, you help. And this next part will be censored again, because I'm pretty sure if I even talked about it, YouTube would age restrict the video and prevent it from going out to most, so Patreon bit, but we're going to cut it back in as smoothly as we can now. And from there, the fight resumes, where we have a now mostly naked Casca screaming at Guts to get away from this thing, but of course, Guts being Guts, he will not back down. We get a whole lot more of fighting, and Griffith very much so approving Guts to going such extremes. This is kind of setting up Griffith being in that, okay, I'm always going to have those tools around me to use in some way, and it feels like he's still looking at Guts in that way. It's like the Griffith gaze, and it's the most upsetting thing. But we actually have Guts doing better this time, seemingly just losing his mind, pushing himself further than he ever has before and landing several key blows. Blood from the demon is spilled, but unfortunately he is then grabbed, and we see him hurled with extreme force through the woods and just bouncing around. The massive demon then attempts to stomp on him, and here is where people think, oh my god, Guts is just dead. Griffith even is shown to be bleeding from the mouth with the amount of tension he is expressing. As Guts is recovering, though, we get a flash to him off with his training he's been doing for the last year with the little girl and the blacksmith. And she is asking him about the one who beat him, to which Guts says, but the one who beat me wasn't like this. He was more. Was he human? The girl asks. Maybe not quite. A monster? I guess something like that. And then the girl says, Guts, do you want to fight with him again? And after a pause, the girl says, you shouldn't. A monster will beat you. To which Guts answers, I don't know. She asks, then can you win? And he says, I can't say. And then she finally asked, which is it? Which wakes Guts from his pain. He lands a quick, cheap blow to manage an escape before he's able to be finished off, and he notices that his sword is breaking. Casca is still begging for him to try and get away, and she even asks, why does he always have to fight? Judo is watching her during this time and is unable to answer because Guts is beyond normal people's comprehension. Not really, he's just just deeply scarred from trauma and needs to prove himself against everything. We then get some dialogue from this demon that I'm not the biggest fan of. Things like,
"You little prick, that really hurt, asshole."
And with Guts' sword breaking, we see he hatches a plan to end this. He hides, and then we get more dialogue from the demon like,
"Hey, where'd you go? If you're alive, answer. Tisk tisk. I haven't been hurt this bad in 100 years, so I got a little carried away. Come out, wherever you are. I'll be a little more careful killing you."
Guts has hidden a body behind a tree to look like him, which is a bait the demon then takes, and knocks down a tree, which sends Guts from up in that tree down onto the demon from above, where he then manages to stab his sword down into the demon's neck face area. This general ouchie spot. I'm going to call that a certified ouchie spot, even for a demon. His sword breaks, but as he drops down, he whips out his knife and shoves it into the demon, holding on as the demon falls down to the ground, seeming victorious. All look on in total awe, and Casca runs to him, receiving a very "I'm okay" thumbs up. This is the most beaten we've seen Guts maybe ever, and still functional, because he's not like out for the count yet, and he's just like, and we get this shot of Casca hugging him, which yeah, that's sweet. From here, we cut to Princess Charlotte, and she is awake now, healing from the poisoning, asking about Griffith. We see the reiteration of the promise for the king to not hunt Griffith, which, you know, wasn't even kept for like a minute. And then she's wondering what Griffith mouthed to her with his no-tongue state as she was pulled away by the assassin sent to save her. It's a weird sentence. And she kind of is psychotic enough to fill it in herself with, "I'm sure he was saying that he would come back, despite there literally being no audible noise." She's like, "He said he'd come back. He said he'd come back." And she looks up into the sky, though, and sees what it looks at first to be a massive bat or bird, but upon a slightly closer examination, that be Nosferatu's son! And we cut to the Band of the Hawk apparently making camp just around where this battle had taken place, and Casca is sewing up Guts. They're having their oh-so-familiar banter back and forth, and Casca is reiterating to Guts that there is no shame in retreating. And when he kind of rejects that idea, she goes, "Fine then, die on your own hand," and then there is a silence between them. Judo is working on healing Griffith, and we get a report from Judo essentially saying that Griffith will never recover, and he doesn't see any way that Griffith will ever return to the former glory that he once was. This, obviously, Griffith being someone that Casca idealizes and wants to help, I guess, in some way still achieve the dreams of, I'm not entirely sure on that, upsets her. And we cut to the guards that are around the dead demon, which has been making some noise, and they're like, "Must be my imagination," which is, I'm sorry, if you were a guard in this world who just found out this thing exists, this monstrous Titan-esque beast, and you heard any kind of movement, you're not gonna go, "Must be my imagination." You're gonna go 30 feet away and ask them to bring all the archers around to finish the job. He deserves to die for that. But we get a nice moment between Guts and Griffith, because Guts is kind of being like friendly and reaffirming to Griffith, offering to take off his mask, but then seeing like, "Oh, you want your armor on," and putting it on Griffith, and just being like an overall good friend. Griffith throughout this time seems to be taking the gestures well, but the demon then, of course, comes back, and we get even sloppier storytelling, in my opinion, than what we've gotten up into this point. The commotion outside raises the alert of Guts and Griffith as they are continuing to have their kind of nice moment together, and Guts opens the wagon door to see the demon outside as it crushes the wagon, and it picks up Griffith and says,
"Don't move. If you do..."
He squeezes and is like, I'll kill Griffith. And the demon remarks,
"What the hell? He's just like some insect. If I wind up dead here, I'll be inside that vortex forever. Hurry and summon them. The great ones. If you're really going to become one of the greats like Zod says, you should have it. The Crimson Behelit, the egg of the king. Use it. Call them our guardian angels."
Which obviously ties into like the thing we got earlier about the old king. We'll talk about that later, I'm sure. "The 4 members of the God Hand." Guts is like, "God?" And Casca yells, "That's enough," commanding the demon to release Griffith, to which the demon just laughs and says,
"Every last one of you's got a twinkle in the eyes. I can't stand it. They ain't the eyes of those who fightin' for a living. They're the eyes of a kid who had his toy taken away. I get it. He's what does it. He's the precious kid's toy. You must be so happy you don't know a damn thing. Your precious toy was broken a long time ago.
He then rips away Griffith's armor, causing him great pain, and lifts up his emaciated form. He reaches for where he thinks the behelit may be, but then he realizes it's not there. And as he says, you're kidding if it's not there, and then Nosferatu f***ing Zod lands behind him.
And his name is John C.
And we get this glorious comparison of demon size. This obviously petrifies Guts as he watches Nosferatu Zod with its horns pick up this dying demon. The demon questions Zod, what do you think you're doing? And there's a bit of demon lore established here where he says like, hey, the only rule is that we do is what we please. If what I please is killing Griffith, then that's fine. I'm allowed to do that. But Zod responds, well, then I'd want to kill you. So I wouldn't be doing anything wrong if I did that. The demon begs, but it's not him. It's not Griffith, to which Zod just rips this demon in half. And I got through all of that while intentionally not memorizing the demon's name, and I'm kind of proud of myself for that. I didn't want to. But then there's this kind of awkward moment where Zod has killed this demon, and the Band of the Hawks all stared at him, and then Nosferatu Zod looks at Griffith, and Zod states, it will return to your hand, because that's how it is.
Okay.
Guts screams, wait, I've got something to ask you. What the hell's the eclipse? Ain't it this monkey monster thing? That death you said I wouldn't be able to escape. Wasn't that him? To which Zod says, you will understand soon. Just get a few more chapters in. Just get a few more chapters in. And then they are all kind of left looking at the dead demon as a horrific image begins to emerge from its stomach. A mass of corpses, well beyond disfiguration, explode from its innards and are sucked up into a vortex within the clouds in the sky. To which Guts says, what did we just see? And everyone's just kind of left in shock as the true form of the demon is revealed to them.
Mr. Roger Stevens?
And it's a frail old man with Guts' sword shoved through its neck. And the final thing we see is Griffith and Guts together looking down on this figure. And oh boy, does that set up a lot for what I feel is to come next in some terrifying ways, because you're looking at this frail old person who is so weak and obviously lacking power, and then you have Griffith being literally held up by Guts, looking down at him. Guts clearly going like, that's what was behind it? What could have possibly happened? Oh my god, this is crazy. Revolution, science, or no, probably not that, but like he's just clearly shocked at that's old man is what turned into that demon. And then you have Griffith clearly going like, oh, looks like there's some ways I could get some power. But obviously, if you can't tell from my overall tone of this review, I was kind of really disappointed by this fairly large chunk of Deluxe Edition 4. It just felt like there could have been some major cleanup, more time spent building one solid villain that could have been brought back then sent back out. I just wasn't the biggest fan. There were some, of course, outstanding moments in the art and good character beats between Griffith, Guts, and Casca, but that was largely overshadowed for me personally, and action to the point where it became somewhat exhausting to get through. Guts is probably the star of this segment. Seeing his just unrelenting force coming onto the page is never not entertaining, but this largely was something that highlighted Berserk's weaknesses rather than its strength, but what this offered on face value was fine. And because of that, I'm going to be rating it completely average, directly fine. I'll nudge it to a 6, because now I'm liking the villain a little bit more. And the gunpowder thing in the hallway fight was cool. And the character moments between Griffith and Guts were really great. Damn it, it's a 6. But let me know what you thought of this in the comments down below. Like and subscribe if you have not already, and tune on in next week, where I have been told incessantly things are about to get much better very quickly, and I'm extremely excited for that. Like and subscribe if you have not already, and hit the Patreon if you want to support what I do here. Let me know if there's any smoother way you feel like I could handle this age restriction type content, displaying the art. I'm doing my best here, and have a good one, y'all. I got books, I got merch, bye! And of course, I'd like to record a special shout out to my latest high tier Patreons: Jerry, the Pink Enthusiast, BK Guy, David York, Lilith J, X Sabriel, John McNam, Tyes Henderson, and Anthony